This is Nathan Lamb.
Daniel Dang.
And Adam McPherson.
We have been assigned to give our presentation on the Composite Design Pattern. The Composite Design Pattern is a lot like recursion. It is when you store an object within the same object. For example, if you have a menu which contains a submenu, both of those menus can fall under the menu class. The main menu object has a menu object. The object is a menu. So essentially, composite design pattern is when you have an object that contains an object of the same type. Because these objects contain objects of the same type, it follows a tree-like structure. You may have an object with multiple child nodes of the same type, or with no child node of the same type. Because of this, it is important to have child management methods, such as add child and remove child. The memory management functions are very similar to the tree memory management methods and add node and remove node. Because the class contains instances of the same class, the contained classes must contain the same variables. This means that the child objects are able to add objects of the same type to themselves as well. If they do not, they are the leaves of the tree and contain only empty variables within themselves. In the example tree code shown here, Composite 1 has a parent variable, but it is not initialized. Composite does have 3 child elements, which are composite classes as well. The parent variable in those objects point to Composite 1. Leaf 1 and Leaf 2 do not have any children classes of type composite, so they are the leaf nodes. Composite 2, however, does have 3 child nodes. Those 3 child nodes, Leaf 3, Leaf 4, and Leaf 5, each contain no children nodes of type composite, but all point to Composite 2 as the parent composite node. This is why the composite design pattern creates a tree-like structure. These tree structures can be traversed in the same way normal trees are traversed, typically by recursion. You can traverse them in breadth first or depth first fashion.
Advantages. So there are a few advantages to using the composite pattern, and one of the advantages of using composite design pattern is that it doesn't need much implementation. By only having to build one class and allowing its subclasses to be members of the same class, you can essentially piece together a tree structure from just one object. This also allows for code reusability. Instead of having to make or remake each class, you just write one class and use it recursively to allow other classes to implement the same data types and functions. Then you can build off that base and apply it to a bunch of different scenarios. This leads to the last advantage. The biggest advantage with composite design patterns is its efficiency. By using the same class and object in a bunch of different ways, this allows you to conserve memory by using the same object and decreases the possibility of bugs by having less variables in play.
Despite the advantages of composite design pattern, there are still a fair share of disadvantages. Most of all, it can be a very complicated design pattern to understand. Recursion can be complicated in itself, as well as tree structures. The design pattern is almost like a combination of the two. It can be also challenging to understand how exactly to implement the design pattern and what it looks like as your program runs. Since there's no real way for the client to know the implementation behind it, it can be a bit challenging to know how exactly everything is being implemented. Another disadvantage is that to recursively iterate through the tree causes a lot of load to be placed on the stack. It is not the most efficient way of iterating through things. Also, recursion can be a bit hard to follow and understand. Another big disadvantage of composite design pattern is if you require the different nodes to reference or talk to each other. The only way for one node to directly access another node is by iterating through the tree. This can take time, especially if it happens often.
Recommendation: when we want to design something like the menus, it would be helpful to have the composite design pattern. The menus also contain submenus. For example, a menu will appear when I hit right-click on my computer. After navigating to Cleanup By, another sub-menu will pop out. As a user, I do not really know how this is set up or implemented behind the scenes. Another good example is the hierarchy setup in the company. Let's use General Manager as our root. The General Manager can have other managers below his or her position. General Manager can hire developer or other manager. When this happens, it will call the add-child method. General Manager can also fire managers or developers. The remove-child method then called. Same goes with the manager. He or she can hire or fire developer. Use the composite design pattern whenever we want to provide an abstract hierarchy structure.
And finally, in conclusion, Composite Design Pattern is a class that contains a variables of the same type. This creates a tree-like structure, so therefore it requires memory management methods such as add child and remove child. Composite Design Pattern is very similar to recursion. Good examples of this pattern are menus containing submenus or directories containing subdirectories. Some of the disadvantages of Composite Design Pattern are clients don't know how the implementation behind Composite Design Pattern is working. Therefore, they treat all objects the same without knowing if there are nested objects. You can use one object or class for many purposes. You can take one class and apply it to a bunch of different scenarios. And it is often an efficient way of solving problems. Some disadvantages of Composite Design Pattern are it is a bit complex and can be hard to understand. Also, it is a tree-like structure which will be traversed recursively. Recursive iteration is very slow on the stack compared to regular iteration. Recursion can also be hard to understand. A large disadvantage of Composite Design Pattern is if you require different nodes to reference or talk to each other, the only way for one node to directly access another node is by iterating through the tree. This can take some time, especially if it happens often. Overall, Composite Design Pattern is beneficial if you need to have directories or subdirectories within them, or menus with submenus in them. If you have a class that contains itself, then that is the Composite Design Pattern. Thank you for watching our show.